Alrighty. So, we're doing a conversation. I found you on YouTube through the comments, and we were talking about vegan stuff. So, first of all, would you consider yourself fully vegan, and how long have you been vegan?
I wouldn't really call myself fully vegan, but other people looking at me would say that. What
Okay.
was the second part of the question?
Just how long you had been vegan, if you were vegan.
Um, i- uh, if it's how other people describe it, the typical avoiding animals, then that's 4.5 years.
Okay. So
Actually, it's almost 5 in 2, like a month. Yeah.
okay. So, so as far as how other people view it, are you saying that for that long you have not consumed meat, dairy, or eggs?
Right. But there was one product where I thought it didn't have anything in it.
Mm-hmm.
It had milk in it, and
Mm-hmm.
that was 2 years in, but I was trying. So I
Gotcha.
guess if people, I don't know how people classify that.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
but
Well,
if yeah.
how did it make you feel? Because I remember when I first went vegan, the getting rid of foods that I like the taste of, I felt like I was doing this thing, and a certain amount of time was like an achievement. So if I slipped up, I almost had this feeling of I might as well throw it all out the window, give up, and try again later. Did it make you feel strange when it happened?
Um, I felt bad that I did it. Like I spent all these years and I still didn't figure it out. Well, the thing is, I get very sick from a lot of different animal products anyways, so I
Oh,
felt like
okay.
something wasn't right. But I realized I didn't do my due diligence, so I realized that I guess it was a teaching moment. It made me realize, even if I make these mistakes, if I uh, if I learn from it and do better, then that's what matters. Then you ascend in veganness. You become more vegan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
When
Um,
I was younger,
mhm.
um, I I started to be on the healthy route when I was 12. So back then I thought something was healthy, like yogurt versus ice cream. But then
Hmm.
um, a few years in, I started to see the trans fat, and it'll say 0 grams, but it'll say hydrogenated oil in the ingredients list. So you
Hmm.
knew it was not trans fat free, even though it'll say 0 grams. Because if it's under zero point
Hmm.
0.5, if they make the serving size so small, it'll just say zero. And then they could advertise it like that.
Gotcha.
Um,
Yeah. It sucks the way they can advertise things. I think with like something like olive oil, if
yeah.
it's less than 50% of it is other kind of oils, they can still call it olive oil.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
No, I
there's a
didn't
lot
know
of
that.
strange rules. Okay, so you mentioned the idea of what other people would perceive as vegan. So what does that mean to you as far as how you view veganism?
Um, Me versus everyone else.
Yeah, like what's your philosophy on what you would call veganism?
Right. So I made up my own definition because I feel that the definition that the vegan society uses, that um, people attribute to veganism, is not where it should be, and that's, Joey talked about it in his video.
Hmm.
So um, I believe it's about helping animals at the end. Because if you avoid all animal products, it's not going to be like, just because you avoid animal products doesn't mean it's vegan. And just because you have animal products doesn't mean it's not vegan. So
Gotcha.
I just wanted to make it like clear. So like it say something's vegan, like eating tomatoes, but they pollinate it using farm bees. That's not
Mhm.
vegan, you know, but
Yeah.
you think it is. So, and then there's also stuff like um, sanctuaries where it's animal products because you're buying a lot of product like animal feed to support these animals.
Mhm.
So that's not vegan, but it is because it's helping animals. So my definition is just to help animals. And the problem is because I'm not an official organization, no one knows about or thinks about my definition or sees it or does anything about it. Whereas they look at the wrong, well, what I think is not applicable to veganism, that definition by the Vegan Society. And so then people get these distorted ideas. So it creates a lot of conflict over what's vegan and what's not. Like veganism's a
Mhm.
developing a area. It's not quite there yet. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I did you watch the most recent podcast that Cosmic Skeptic did with Earthling Ed?
No, no, I didn't.
Okay.
Um,
He
but
brings
yeah, you could.
well, he brings up this idea about how being vegan is doing essentially doing the best you can to make animals not suffer, and how similar to like if you were stranded somewhere and you had to eat, like if you're stranded on an island, you had to eat an animal to survive, it
Mhm.
wouldn't make you not vegan. And so an example he was asking Ed about was if people live in like northern Canada, so like kind of Eskimo like, where the majority of what they have to eat is animal products, if they are doing the best they can, but they don't have other options, should we technically call them vegans even though they're eating meat? And a lot of people got really upset at this idea, but I think it's fascinating to look at ideas like this.
Yeah, because it. See, this is why there's issues with the definition because there's ambiguities in these gray areas. So my definition of helping animals um, removes those ambiguities because I believe in making utilizing the most that we can out of people towards helping animals because it's not going to be perfect. Like maybe people are not going to try and fail. Like for me, I'm trying to buy from vegan only places because if you're buying from places that have animal products, then and sell vegan stuff on the side, they don't really know what vegan is, or they'll just use that money to keep their store going. So, um, I try, but then I fail. So it's like, as
Hmm.
long as I tried, that's what matters most at the end. There's so
Hmm.
many of these vegans on the internet where
Yeah.
they will try to like say, well, you stop being vegan. This is horrible. But the thing is, it's all about experimenting, like trying
Hmm.
it out. And if it didn't work, taking a step back and seeing what can we do better, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Um, well, yeah, it's kind of like, I don't know if you've ever seen this argument, but when people talk about super meat, the scientific creating meat in a lab by using biopsies from like cow cells,
Yeah.
um, like taking a biopsy from a cow, like so putting a needle in it, pulling out the biopsy, and then creating this fake meat that if it were to work, if we were able to grow meat that is identical to how meat eaters want to eat meat, that it would essentially have the potential of making nobody ever farm and eat animals ever again. And there will be vegans out there that will say, but we shouldn't do the biopsy. Every little bit counts and we shouldn't do that biopsy.
Hmm.
And it's just, it's such a ridiculous idea to say, let's not do the biopsy and hope we can turn everybody vegan without the super meat versus doing the biopsy and creating the super meat and potentially turning everybody into vegans, even like kind of on an accident.
So, I put on my website this, and it's not really fully hashed out yet, but
Hmm.
it's pretty usable right now. It's a gradient graph. You know, the ones where it shows like Democrat versus Republican and it has like
Hmm.
a blue to the red.
Yeah.
I did that, but with different factors involved, where it's like, so so my gradient is the absolutist side versus the
Mm.
reductionist side. So an
Mm.
absolutist is one that says no animal products at all. The
Hmm.
reductionist side says, well, we lessened it, and that's what matters, you know. It's
Hmm.
100 down to 50. But the absolutist will be upset and says, no, that's still 50.
Hmm.
So you have to think about it like, is this a reductionist idea or an absolutist idea? And that's kind of what's pulling veganism apart right now. There's these two, what's the word for splitting? There's a like the, well, anyway, it's
Hmm.
there's two divergent groups, the
Mm.
reductionist and the absolutist. I think people are kind of a mix of both
Hmm.
in ways because we live in a non-vegan world, you know.
Yeah. Well, I think it's reasonable to be an absolutist for yourself and
Mm-hmm.
to be a reductionist for everyone else.
In principle.
Yeah, because I mean, if the ultimate, I guess you have to look at your goals. If your goal is to make yourself feel better, then I guess you could be an absolutist. But if your goal is to cause as little suffering as possible, then I would think you'd have to be a reductionist because you'd want to look at how. Well, here's one way I'd look at it: is if you could convince 10 people to eat half the amount of meat they normally eat, or convince one person to go vegan, you would save more animals and cause less suffering by convincing the 10 to just eat half the amount. And even though it's nice to add an extra vegan to our group, that's still not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is just to have less suffering because we don't like suffering, or at least for me.
It's like we have to realize that reductionist, to me, I don't consider reductionist to be vegan. That's why when people think, well, if you're reducing, then you're vegan, but it creates a slippery slope where you're like, well, I'm going to eat two fewer steaks this month, you know, and you're
Gotcha.
still eating steaks, you know.
Yeah.
So reductionist, it doesn't. So I feel like a true vegan is an absolutist, has no animal products at all. Um,
Just
a
as far as what they
reductionist,
consume.
huh?
Just as far as what they consume.
um, yeah, in terms of what they consume, but I think when you think about consuming, it's not just you. It's, say, the person that delivers the food to you
Mhm.
and the person before that and so when
Yeah.
it's like true, I mean, you have to think about the whole part of being that makes you you, you know.
Yeah. Well, so the
Yeah,
reason I think if somebody, let's say somebody was vegan for all year around, but one day a year they ate meat. The idea of not calling that person a vegan, I mean, in a sense they're not, but so let's imagine that in one category. So you have somebody that is vegan all year round except one day. So we're going to set that aside. And now I'm going to set up
yeah,
another example and we'll see how it compares. So
yeah.
if you, let's say you have a vegan that you have different types of foods you can eat. So you have foods that grow on trees, like apples, avocados, various different things that, aside from maybe pesticides, no animals are going to be harmed in the production of foods that grow on trees. But you
Hmm.
have foods that grow in fields like onions, carrots, potatoes, and the plowing up of the fields
Yeah.
will kill mice and various different things. Which I anyways, yeah, anyways, I'm not going where most non-vegans go with this idea, but
Yeah.
I'm just saying, so like if a vegan, if me today, if I ate 50% of my produce was from stuff that grew on trees, and 50% was stuff that was in fields. I would feel like I was more of a vegan if I did more like 40% of stuff in fields and 60% on trees. Because the more I cut back on what's in fields, not that that's necessarily the healthiest thing, but it
Right.
it would be cutting down on the animals dying.
Mhm.
So if somebody ate tree food, so nuts, apples, avocados, and that's
Right.
all they ate all year round, and then one day they ate meat, I wonder how that would compare to a vegan that eats no meat the entire year, but every day half the stuff they eat is stuff that would have like field mice die.
I guess like with both of these, you could consider one to be plant-based and the other to
Mm.
be reducitarian. So
Yeah.
plant-based, reducitarian. There's a lot of these um as spin-offs of the vegan definition simply because it created this hey, I found the word rift, you know.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it create the vegan definition because of its ambiguities and contradictions. It creates these rifts that lead to these divergences um, of the
Mhm.
different types of diets, and that's why people are like, "Why are there so many labels, so many names?" It's because that's what happens. So,
Mhm.
one is a reducitarian. They're not fully ridding of all the animal products. The other one's plant-based because they still involve the killing of animals in
Mm.
some way, pesticides and plowing of the fields, which not only impacts the field mice, but what people don't really talk about with the vegan um, realm is the disruption of the soil microbiota and the
Mhm.
disruption of the ecosystem in the soil because there's a whole like whatever's above ground is also for life is also below ground. The worms,
Mm.
the animals that burrow, like some insects do, and animals, all that also gets disrupted when you pull up in soil. And once you destroy the, you know how we got got microbiome? Well, it
Mhm.
kind of comes from soil. So if you disrupt the microbiome of the soil, and I think they call it microbiota,
Mhm.
um, then you're destroying the life underground um, too. And that's why I'm kind of against uprooting plants. Not only that,
Mhm.
but it also kills the plant in certain ways. Not always. Like you
Mhm.
can uh, cut off the like root of the carrot, and you could put it back in the ground. It'll still like grow, but that's like
Oh.
something different. But
Mhm.
what I'm saying is, there's a lot more to it. I think a good topic would be like thinking like for next time is um, the appeal to ignorance. Like, should if we don't know better, is that okay? You know, are we
Gotcha.
still vegan? You know. Anyway,
Yeah, no, that's a great
but
topic.
yeah,
So yeah, we should definitely we'll save that one to have its
yeah,
own separate topic. But one thing I would say, I can't remember how you labeled the two things where you had the
right.
reductionist versus the other side
Vegetarian,
was plant-based.
plant based. Yeah,
I would say that even though I am not against eating vegetables, even with the knowledge of the field mice,
right.
um, I would say that the claim that eating meat and tree food, eating meat one day a year and the rest tree food, is more ethical than being vegan full all year round with eating the carrots and onions. If we were just going to compare what is more or less ethical.
Like if you
Um,
think about how many animals die for this one versus the
mhm.
other one. And that's why sometimes some vegans might actually lead to more animals being killed than
Yeah.
one that isn't. You know, is that person less ethical just because of their label?
Mhm. Well, but
Maybe not. Yeah.
also that being said, even though I would make that claim about it being ethical, see, people don't want to think of themselves as wrong, which is why most meat eaters get very upset and just want to counter everything a vegan says because they don't want to say, what I'm doing is wrong, and so they're upset. So same thing with a vegan. If a vegan feels like they're doing the right thing, they don't want to think of what they're doing as having any element of not being ethical. So even though I think that it's more ethical to eat meat one day a year and then the tree food, because at this point in time, I feel like it's good for me to eat the foods that are grow in the ground that field mice might die from. I'm because my focus is myself. My focus, it, me just being an animal, I want to survive. I want to do what I think is the best for myself, and I also want to do what's the best for like my loved ones. And so if I think that eating carrots and potatoes are more healthy than not eating them, I will eat them, and I will do the best I can to not let anything suffer. So if I know that field mice are suffering from it, and then I find out that this other farm figured out how to make mice not be around and they weren't, I would go for that. But
Hmm.
I'm not going to sacrifice myself. But as soon as I am able to focus on myself, then everything becomes focusing on the animals, which is why I don't eat animals, but I might do something like letting them die on accident in field harvesting.
So I think there's one part missing in the whole thing, because what
Okay.
you're talking about is optimization, and it's on my website for under like morals and standards, where I it people call it a religion. It's just a way of living, it like a mode, and that is going with the best possible. But the second part of it is to continue to educate yourself, if it's especially if it's not the where you should be, like where your potential is, because I believe everything is about reaching your potential in life for the
Mm-hmm.
individual. If you're not there, then, and even if you are, to think, continue to look for better. So
Mm-hmm.
while you might be getting those potatoes and they're not perfect, if you sit around and say, okay, that's it, I did the best I could.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, best isn't good enough, because there's
Mm-hmm.
better out there. So it's like you gotta you gotta say, okay, this is what I did at the in 2023 right now. But I'm going to say this, I'm not going to settle for less than best. This is not my peak of where I could be. So let me keep looking until I find what I need to do and then do that. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Because
Oh
there
yeah,
might be a
definitely.
farm right next door and you don't know it because you
Right.
didn't look. So you're
Yeah.
like, you give up.
Yeah,
Easy.
and a lot of it comes down to how much time we have for researching and
Yes.
what's going on in life. So I remember when I first heard about the boycott of palm oil because of it affecting orangutans.
Yeah.
Um, and so that I never did research on that. Right now, I
Right.
actually eat pretty much whole foods, so just stuff that grows. I don't eat processed stuff. But back when I did eat processed stuff and I would eat vegan butters and stuff like that, where like Earth Balance, I think, has palm
Yeah.
oil in it.
I did too.
Um, that's a perfect example of, if at that time the only way to get that oil is to harm these orangutans, then I think that's another thing, like you were saying, where you learn this new thing and then you change that element if you are able
Mm-hmm.
to. And
Yeah.
so yeah, I agree that everything comes down to figuring out the best you can to do the best you
Optimize.
can.
Yeah.
And part of it comes down to your mental health as well. If you don't have the if you're feeling overwhelmed by all the things you feel like you're supposed to research, then don't do it right away. Take time, do baby steps, one step at a time, especially if you have the goal of preventing the suffering.
Actually, that's that's one of the issues I have with the vegan activist, where they will say just go vegan, but they won't tell you. And like
Mhm.
when I first saw the vegan activism with the documentaries, they were like, just go vegan. They wouldn't tell anyone how. So it's like people would just do nothing. You know, those
Yeah.
videos where they would be like, okay, a banana here, that's vegan. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
So, you have to be, you can't just go in the direction unprepared. You need to be prepared for it. You can't just say, I'm quitting cold tofu and going straight into veganism, because
Mhm.
a lot of people do that and then it doesn't work and then they stop, and it's because they don't realize that there's more to it. Like, you have to change your microbiome in your gut to be able to digest the foods properly. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's like, I guess we could talk more now about like the that argument from ignorance, like a logical fallacy where um like, if you don't know something, is it that person's fault that they don't know better? Like, what would
Hmm.
you say about that one?
Well, first of all, I want to say that I love that you said cold tofu. It
Yeah.
took me a second, but it reminded me of how I say feed a fed horse instead of beat a dead horse.
Yeah, I
Um,
like that.
but
I got it from Chuck Carroll of Physicians Committee. Yeah.
oh, gotcha.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But the question you just asked, I kind of want, so I feel like this conversation has been great and I would actually feel perfectly fine uploading it, but
Yeah.
assuming that you might view it as a practice and listening back, you might go like, "Oh, I wish I was more
Oh,
ready."
should we
Uh,
stop recording
I
or?
was I was gonna say
Yeah.
I want to stop recording and then I want to hit record again and have you ask the question you just asked.
Okay. Okay.
So let me hold on one sec.
And you're able to cut this part out, so that's fine.
So